Do you love Belize and want to stay here long term? If so, you might want to consider Belize residency. It's Linda in Belize. Today I'm going to talk about the process I went through applying for my permanent residence, some other options you may consider, as well as the detailed process and timing of my permanent residence application. Although this video is focused on permanent residence, I do want to talk about other ways you could stay in Belize. So the first one is to extend your 30-day visitor permit. So if you go into immigration, pay $100 US, you get an extension for another 30 days. A lot of people do this when they first come to the country to decide if it's where they want to move. Now, if you do like Belize and you're retired, the Qualified Retired Person Program might work well for you. There's a lot of requirements to meet this program, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. If you are working, you might consider getting a work permit in Belize. Now, in this case, you typically need a job and your employer will apply for it for you, but you can't take a job away from a local that's qualified. So it depends on what type of profession you're in. The next option, of course, is permanent residence, which we're going to go into a lot of detail on next. But I did want to mention briefly temporary residence. The benefit of temporary residence is you do not need to stay in Belize for 12 months like you do for permanent residence, but you need to do a letter describing why this is the case. Perhaps you have a business that you have to go back to occasionally, but you're living in Belize, that kind of thing. But temporary residence also requires an investment in the country of $250,000 US. So if you know that you would like to be a resident in Belize, but you really can't meet that 12-month requirement, I would say looking into temporary residence is definitely worth doing. Let's talk about some of the benefits to permanent residency. Obviously, the first one is avoiding the 100 US monthly renewal. The next thing is, of course, the ability to work in the country. You could get a work permit, but that has to be renewed every year and is only possible for certain types of jobs. With permanent residency, you only renew your card every 5 years. Another thing to consider is what kind of property you're able to rent if you don't own your own property. So in Belize, the rules are basically that if you're a tourist with that 30-day stamp, you're not able to do long-term rentals without paying hotel tax. So there are some hotel-approved accommodations that will rent long-term, but they definitely have to charge you that hotel tax, which means renting is going to be more expensive. The other benefit to permanent residency is that after you have it for 5 years, you're able to apply to be a citizen. And in today's environment, a lot of people really like to have a second passport. Let's look at how you qualify for permanent residence. So, the first requirement is that you have to have been legally residing in Belize for a minimum of 1 year at the time of submitting your application. And the thing that's really hard for many people is that during the year, you could not have left the country for more than 14 days in total. Now, I did mine in 2021, and since it was still COVID, I couldn't really travel a lot anyway. It was perfect. If you can't meet this requirement, that's where temporary residence is something that you might have to go to instead, because that is where you can't meet the ordinary requirements, which is this period, this one here. So you also have to provide proof to the immigration office that you have been and will continually be financially stable. There are lots of requirements to show this that I'll go through when we go through the documents required. The other thing is you can't have been convicted of a criminal offense. So that's the other important thing. So what documents do you need for permanent residence? Well, first of all, I would recommend that you be very patient, because even though there's a list of documents here, there's going to be typically things you need to provide in addition to what you see here, depending on what you first give. So the web link is right here. So if you're trying to look for it, you can always just search for immigration. If you go into the regular website, immigration.gov.bz, and then search for this, and there's all these different menus that you can find for everything. But basically here, documents, you need a passport, and it's going to be all the pages of your passport photocopied. You need a medical certificate and tests. I got that from my doctor in San Pedro with no issue. She does them all the time, so she knew exactly what was required. You need the police record, proof of financial stability, photographs, And then if you have a spouse and a child, their documentation as well. So there's a lot more details in here talking about what kind of tests you need for your medical, how your police record works, how you give proof of financial stability, etc. So lots of different information here. But what I found, for example, is when I gave my proof of financial stability, I gave information about my rental property. So I had a few months of bank statements because I have income outside Belize from my rentals in Canada. They then wanted all the leases from my properties as an example. So depending on the type of income you have, it's best to first talk to immigration to see exactly what you need. So it's better to bring more rather than less. And if you do have questions, the people at the immigration office are very willing to help you if you're patient and nice. But typically they will tell you that oftentimes you'll bring in everything you think you need, and then they will ask you for some more things and you'll have to come back again. So if you're thinking about applying for permanent residence and you want the application form, you can actually get that online now as well. So same website, but at the very bottom here, you'll see residence forms, just like there's the fees, where to apply, etc. So everything is right here on the web. So right at the top here, there's the residence form. So if you click that, it'll take you right into the form that you need to fill out. Okay, so that is one thing you can do, whereas in the past, and you still can, of course, go and get this from immigration directly. So you can see here, it's a fairly long form here, and a lot of people do try to get someone to help them with this, but I would say it's best to just do it on your own, and when you have questions, go to immigration to ask them. So let's go back here. It talks about how you do the application here on the website, and it also gives you additional forms that you might need depending on your situation. Now, once you're approved and you want to go make the payment, you need what's called a security bond. So this is when you are going, like your residence application's already been approved, which I showed you could do online. Basically, you can click this form here, and basically you need a natural-born Belizean to fill this out for you. So you could see here how it works. They have to be holder of a Belize passport, and it basically says that this person's going to guarantee to pay for you if you have to leave the country. Okay, so this does have to be notarized as well, and you can see that there's a $1.50 postage stamp that you have to include with your application. So this does need to be signed by a justice of the peace. So what I did is I actually had my friend that is a Belizean sign my bond, and I went to a notary right in San Pedro, and notaries don't actually charge in Belize, which they're not allowed to, so that's one of the great things. But just make sure before you go to Belmopan to pay for permanent residency that you get this completed and that you have your postage stamp with you. So when you submit your application, they actually give you a website where you can check the status. So here it is, status.immigration.gov.bz. And in here you would click Immigration Service, pick Residence Application, your record locator, date of birth, and then you can check the status. So let's go look at mine. So how did mine work in terms of timing? Well, I submitted my application on January 25th, 2022, as you can see here. And that was about one month after I met the requirements of 12 months. And you can actually do this on the exact day where you have your 12 months in if you gather your paperwork in advance. So I definitely recommend doing that if you want to be able to leave the country sooner. Because once this application is accepted and you get the paperwork, that's when you're actually allowed to leave more than the 14 days. The next step is a police interview. Now, I don't have an update in here for that, and that's just because they weren't updating things at the time, but it didn't really matter. I went into immigration in San Pedro, and they said, don't worry about what it says here, even though this did happen. So when did I get my call from the police? Well, it was in March of 2022, so just a couple months after I applied, and they completed the police interview. And then when I kept checking online, I actually found that it said my application review was completed and approved on December 1st, 2022. So just over 10 months. A lot of people have taken longer than this. I know some people that were shorter, but it really just depends on how busy immigration is and how complicated your file is. So because my application was approved, I decided to go make payment the next time I was in Belmopan, which was in January of 2023. However, they were closed for payments. Happened the day before I went, unfortunately, but now I have been able to make my payment finally. So I basically went to Belmopan almost every month while I was doing other things and it was on the way to see if they were accepting payments. And finally, September 6th, I was there and able to make my payment. The great news with this is that after you make your payment and you have a receipt, you can actually avoid the monthly visitor extensions. And the way you do this is asking for your permanent residence number so that you have that, and then you can leave the country without having an extension stamp. I had a friend that actually made his payment and he just left the country after visiting for a while, and he did not have to pay his extension. So that's great news once you've made your payment. A short amount after making the payment, your card should be ready for pickup. Now, my friend had paid in January. His card is still not ready for pickup, but I just made my payment September 6th, and online here it says my card is ready for pickup. And that was updated for September 15th. It says it's ready, so on Tuesday, I'm going to go in and hopefully I will have my permanent residence card. So what are the fees for permanent residency? Well, it depends on your nationality. So you can see here the first thing I wanted to note is that if you have minor children, it's 50% of the adult fee based on nationality. So if you're in a CARICOM country, your fee is 1,000 Belize. Central American countries, Mexico and Dominican Republic, 1,500. Commonwealth countries, which of course Canada and the UK qualify, 3,000. So that's what I paid, 3,000 Belize, 1,500 US for my permanent residency. And if you're in other countries, US falls under this, of course, then you're paying 4,000 Belize, which is 2,000 US dollars. So hopefully those fees kind of help you with knowing how much you're going to pay. Now, I was able to make my payment on credit card, but I would recommend bringing cash with you if you're going to make the payment, just in case the machine happens to be down, because I've heard that happens at times. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the timing of payments. Normally, you should be able to make a payment a lot sooner than I was able to. It was just that it was closed down for an audit at the time I was able to, or I should have been able to do it. So to summarize, there's really 6 steps to getting your residence. After you meet your 12-month requirement, step 1 is to gather your required documents. Step 2, submit the application to an immigration office. Then you have an interview with immigration. Once the police call you, you can have that interview with the police within 3 months of your application being accepted. Then you get notification by the immigration office, which of course I got mine online. And then you pay and submit your security bond. And then the last step is to get delivery of your residency card. I hope this video has helped you understand the permanent residency process here in Belize. And if you have any questions, make sure you reach out or put a comment right on the video. I hope to see you soon in Belize.